go. Wow.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Getting the Most Out of Year-round Federal Pell Grants. My name is Aaron Washington, and I work in the Office of Post-Secondary Education Policy Planning and Innovation.
Hi, I'm Marie Fitzpatrick, and I work in FSA's Program Management Services, specifically on the Pell Grant.
And my name is Daniel Barkowitz, and I'm the Assistant Vice President of Financial Aid at Valencia College, and I'm thrilled to be part of the panel to offer a school's perspective on the implementation of federal Pell Grants. So thank you for the invitation.
Thank you for coming. So we do have a lot of availability up front. I see there's a lot of folks in the back left corner. If you wanted to come forward, you are more than welcome to. So I'm going to start the presentation by going over the legislative background of the year-round Pell Grants. I will give some of the general requirements, and also I'll talk about the rules that changed in 2017. I will end my portion of the presentation by going over some really basic high-level policy examples. Marie will discuss operational considerations for year-round Pell, and the goal generally of the Federal Student Aid Conference is to demystify federal student aid generally. And in that vein, we thought it would be a great idea to add Daniel to the panel so he can give you the on-the-ground perspective from an institution about how they implemented and promoted year-round Pell on their campus. So year-round Pell was enacted in mid-2017 as a part of the Consolidated and Appropriations Act. The Appropriations Act amended the Higher Education Act to allow a student to receive up to 150% of their scheduled award for an award year. The law is self-implementing, and many of you may or may not know that the Federal Register publishes a code of federal regulations each year, and the Pell regulations are found at Part 690. ED, the Department of Education, ED is an acronym, is currently working to update and publish regulations that reflect the current statutory requirements, but until that is published, just know that the current regs are out of sync with the Higher Education Act, the current law. And so please refer to Dear Colleague Letter Gen 1706 for all of your information. So this is an example. I brought props of the Code of Federal Regulations.
I didn't know we were supposed to bring props.
Yes, did you remember yours, Daniel?
I could have brought the COD technical reference, but that's really big. And I don't print it out.
So a student must be otherwise eligible to receive Pell and have a valid ICER. So what do I mean by otherwise eligible? So a few things could be, for the Pell Grant program specifically, they have to demonstrate financial need. Another thing could be having a valid social security number. Another thing could be they could be a US citizen or eligible non-citizen. And the reason I said the last one is I was plugging my session for tomorrow. So come to that one too if you want to learn more. You have to be enrolled at least half time in the payment period for which the student will receive the additional Pell funds. And I'm going to honestly sound like a broken record, and I'm going to highlight that on pretty much all the slides of my presentation, because that's one of the main things that changed with year-round Pell and one of the only things that changed with year-round Pell. The benefit of year-round Pell is that a student may be able to take more coursework within one award year and potentially finish their program faster. However, keep in mind that it does count towards lifetime eligibility used. So the student is also exhausting their eligibility faster. So for example, if the student uses 150% of their eligibility for an award year versus 100%, they would use their eligibility in 4 years as opposed to 6 years. There are 5 Pell formulas. They have not changed, and you calculate the payment for the payment period under that existing formula. So I'll give you an example. A standard term program could potentially use Formula 1 to calculate Pell for each payment period, and that would include the payment period that contained the additional Pell. A student's payment period can contain funds from both the initial award and the additional award. And for those of us who are more visual learners, we'll see what I'm referring to in one of the high-level policy examples. So let's talk about the difference between the old 2 Pels and 1 award year requirements. Actually, this happened before I was at the department, so many of you may have more direct experience with 2 Pels and 1 award year than even I do. So there's no acceleration requirement, so you don't have to count credits and ensure that the student has completed at least an award year's worth of credit. And you also don't have to place the crossover payment period in the award year that generates the largest Pell Award. So there are only 2 things that changed: the limitation on receiving only 1 scheduled award, and to receive the additional Pell Grant, you have to be enrolled, or the student has to be enrolled at least half-time. So we have the old way. We'll go through it one more time. A student may receive only 1 scheduled award for the award year. And remember, it's still reflected that way in the Code of Federal Regulations. And the new way is a student may receive up to 1 1/2 of a scheduled award for an award year, and this is the upward limit. The student does not automatically get the maximum. So the old way, less than half-time, is eligible at all times. And the new way, you must be enrolled at least half-time to receive the additional award. And so this does not mean you use the half-time payment schedule. You still use the correct payment schedule for the student's enrollment status. So we'll see this in one of the examples, but you always calculate Pell for the payment period, and if the amount is greater than the remaining balance of the scheduled award, the amount for the payment period is made up of the remaining balance plus the additional amount. And you don't have to worry about this because it is reported to COD as one amount. So here is one of our first examples. This is an example of a Formula One program. Do we have any schools of Formula One programs in attendance with us? Oh, there you go. I see a few hands out there. So we know that Formula One is generally a standard term program, at least 30 weeks of instructional time, no overlapping terms, and 12 credit hours for full-time enrollment. So in this example, summer 2018 is a header, right? So we calculate the award based on a 3/4 time payment schedule. For fall 2018, the student is full-time, and we're going to calculate the award based on a full-time payment schedule. And the student has now used 87.5023% of her scheduled award. In the spring 2019, it's also full-time, so we're going to calculate that award. So the spring 2019 award was made up of 12.4977% remaining from the initial Pell Grant, and 37.5023% from the additional Pell Grant. So if the student had used 100% of her Pell Grant for the summer 2018 and fall 2018, the spring 2019 award would be entirely from the additional Pell Grant award. So here we have another example of a clock hour program that occurs entirely within the 18-19 award year. The first payment period is 1/2 of the scheduled award based on the hours and weeks, and the second payment period is the same. The third and final payment period is only 225 clock hours and 6.5 weeks of instructional time. So we prorate the award accordingly, and the student is eligible to receive the additional Pell because this student is going to be attending at least half-time. And the student has now received 125% of their scheduled award. If the program was longer, they would be able to receive 150% or up to 150% of their scheduled award. So let's go back to a semester example for a moment to discuss determining the award year for a payment. So why do you all think that I chose summer 2018 to be a header? You can just shout out at me, don't worry, you won't scare me. I'm sorry? Well, I think I heard somebody in one of the front rows say it, because the student is going to be attending less than half-time, right? And that was one of the only changes. To receive additional Pell, the student has to be attending at least half-time, right? And so for this example, with the student in particular is more likely to attend at least half-time in the spring term. So we decided to include the summer 2018 as a header because they're going to be attending less than half time and base our initial award on that. So what condition has to exist for the student in this example to receive Pell in spring 2019? Because we know they're attending less than half time in the summer out of our initial award, and so the additional award is going to be based out of spring 2019. So what condition has to exist for the student to get the additional Pell in the spring 2019? You can just shout out. All right, so this student is full-time, so they're good to go. In this example, summer 2019, so we see the purple box, summer 2019 could also be a trailer, and this is because the student had some remaining eligibility left. So we see that from summer, fall, and spring, they've only used 112% of their eligibility, so you could also include it as a trailer to 2019 as well. So let's walk through a few recalculation examples for terms that do include the additional Pell. So the conditions are the student is only eligible for the additional Pell Grant Award. The student enrolls in 2 3-credit-hour courses prior to the add drop date for the term, and the institution's policy is to recalculate a student's Pell Award up to the add drop date for the term. So result A, the student begins attendance in all classes. After the add drop date, the student drops 1 3-credit-hour course. So in this example, the student would still be eligible for the additional Pell, and this is because the student established eligibility by beginning attendance in all classes, and they dropped their class after the Pell recalculation date. Result B, a student begins attendance in all classes. Prior to the add drop date, the student dropped 1 3-credit-hour course, and the student would be considered less than half time and not eligible for the additional Pell in this result. And although the student did establish initial eligibility by beginning attendance in all classes, he dropped a class prior to the recalculation date, and after the recalculation date, the student is less than half time and therefore not eligible for the additional Pell. So result C, we'll do a little twist this time. The institution has not done an initial calculation before the term began, and the student established eligibility by beginning attendance in all classes that would support half-time enrollment, and the drop occurred after the institution's recalculation date. But the school, keep in mind, had not done an initial calculation. At the time of the initial calculation, the student is less than half time and therefore ineligible for the Pell Grant. And that's a lot of words. So if you have any questions about this example, please come up to the mic afterwards and we can walk through it slower. This is the final example I'll go through for recalculation before turning it over to Marie. So this is an example of a standard semester-based credit hour program with summer divided into 2 modules, Summer 1 and Summer 2. Summer 1 has the only Pell recalculation date. The school's policy is to check enrollment status as of the recalculation date and disperse based on that status. So accordingly, our school disperses half-time Pell. And subsequent to the recalculation date, the student withdrew from 1 3-credit-hour course that she was scheduled to take in Summer 2. Recalculation is required because the student did not begin attendance in all classes for which the payment for the payment period was based. And because the student is now less than half time, they're not eligible for the additional Pell. And what happened? We already dispersed. And so that money would have to be returned. And I'll turn it over to Marie.
Wow. You didn't have one more? Yeah, you covered that. Okay, thanks, Erin. Again, my name is Marie Fitzpatrick, and I'm working on the operational aspects of Pell. How many of you were in the year-round Pell session last year that I did? Show of hands. Okay. You might be very disappointed in these slides because nothing's changed. We're just going to go through a few things, and this is just a sub-agenda item for the operational part of this. So we're going to go over the additional eligibility flag and talk about how you guys are doing it well or not so well. We're going to talk about the total eligibility used calculation. We're going to highlight some of the tools, talk about the potential overaward process that is very affected by year-round Pell, and we'll talk a little bit more about setting the AEI correctly because you guys didn't get enough of that last year. and I'll give you some operational reminders. So first we're going to talk about the Additional Eligibility Indicator, and I will probably not remember to call it by its full name throughout this presentation, so I apologize the acronyms that spew from Department of Ed people. We just love our acronyms, so it will be the AEI flag. So yes, this is all in review since we've all been working with the AEI for over a year now. In order for the COD system to know a school wants to process any Pell higher than 100% of the student's eligibility, a school must set the Additional Eligibility Indicator. Is the only way that it's going to get through our system. So I'm not sure if I can make that any clearer. It's an optional tag. If the student is not eligible, you don't have to send it to us. It's not like you have to send us either a true or false for people. If they are not eligible, blank is fine. Don't send the tag. We're fine with that. And I can't stress this last part enough. This is your school's certification of the student's eligibility. So I get a lot of questions about why can't I just set the AEI for every student and then just process Pell however I want to? And honestly, I get that question more from software vendors than I do from schools, because not all of your students are eligible for year-round Pell. So not all of your Pell eligible students should have an AEI flag marked as yes. That's the answer. So this is your certification. You wouldn't willy-nilly set all of your verification certifications that you send to us as V. And in that same vein, you would not send all of your AEI flags in as true to us for the same reason. Okay, let's talk about the total eligibility use calculation. Again, a little bit in review. Total eligibility used is the amount of Pell Grant dispersed across all schools for that student in the same award year. So it's not just the disbursements at your school, it's the one from the school they transferred from or the school they're going to be transferring to. It's all of them together. So the TEU, total eligibility used, is recalculated in the COD system every time you do something to a disbursement. You send us an upward adjustment, it recalculates it. You back down and you reduce a student's disbursement, it recalculates it. It is constantly being recalculated. So what it was at the time you dispersed is not possibly what it's going to be 3 months from now, because it's constantly being recalculated. The TEU becomes very important when you have a student that transfers into your institution and you are attempting to calculate their remaining eligibility. So you want to look at that figure in order to figure out how much they have left. And setting the Additional Eligibility Indicator to true, it means that the total eligibility is or will be greater than 100% for that student at some time during that award year. So you can see that the system has to make a note that we're no longer editing your Pell Grants for that student at the 100% limit. So the AEI, COD monitors the AEI very closely when calculating the student's total eligibility to use maximum limit that we're editing against in the system, because it has a direct effect on the value that we're editing against. So we're going to take a look at that. So when calculating and editing against the total eligibility used, the COD system looks for specific qualifiers, and the AEI is one of those qualifiers that is considered. Another is whether there has been any closed school adjustments during that award year, and I will not be covering closed school adjustments in this presentation. So if you have questions about that, I can take it after. So if the Additional Eligibility Indicator is false or not submitted blank, that's good too, however you want to do it. The COD system edits against the maximum total eligibility used at the standard 100% for that student. So see the first equation in red on the screen. If the additional eligibility indicator comes in as true to the COD system, it automatically says, okay, I'm now editing at the 150%, second red formula on the screen there. Okay. We're going to talk about identifying year-round Pell Grant issues. First and foremost, the thing that we give you first from the out of the COD system is that we're going to constantly be giving you edits to tell you what's happening with your additional eligibility indicator and how those edits interplay with the student's record. So most of these should be very familiar to you. You know, 65 is when your award is now less than your disbursements. You somehow went in there and you reduced your award amount, but disbursements are still hanging out there, and now they're more than your award amount. So that's a problem. You know, 68 is your POP, and the other 4, we'll talk about those. So don't ignore your edits. They're returned in your common record response, whether you gave us that via batch, whether you sent us that on the web, however you did it, we're going to send you back these edits. So we've been working with Year-round Pell for over a year now, and I hope you're all familiar with the edits. But these are tools that we give you to help yourself. You can help yourself figure out most of your Pell Grant year-round Pell issues if you just look at the edits that we're sending back to you. The number one thing that it's causing POPs these days, and we've seen a huge influx, is not setting the AEI flag to true appropriately. That is the number one thing, and we saw a big jump this year in that. So please check for your edit 68s. If you have a software vendor that is not giving you the appropriate kind of reporting on some of the edits that are coming back in your batches, please talk to your software vendor. If you are a software vendor and you want to talk to us about how you can best serve your customers by giving them some output that would be helpful, that would be great too. Happy to talk to anybody. We're very supportive of schools correctly updating your certification for year-round Pell through the AEI, and if you find that a student is no longer eligible, we're very supportive of you changing that appropriately and promptly. But please be aware of the award and disbursement amounts that also need to be updated. You can't just go in there and willy-nilly change your AEI to false and then leave everything else the way it is. And that's really what award level edits 73, 74, and 75 are all about. They're about changing your additional eligibility indicator from true to false, and then not appropriately changing everything else that goes along with that in the student's record. So keep an eye on those. You can read all about these edits that I've highlighted here. They're ones listed on the previous slide. They're in the COD technical reference, volume 2, section 4. It's one of my favorite volumes. You know, I have 4 favorite volumes. They are the implementation guide, the common record, the edits, and the section on reports, volume 6, section 8. Love those. Okay, those are my 4 favorite ones. Those are ones that I might almost print out. Everything else, just digital. Okay, second other thing, covered edits. Now we're talking about the reports. So the ways that you could review the AEI flag and what you've reported to the department are through your reports. So we have wonderfully informative edits, they're great, but sometimes you don't get edits, sometimes there's nothing wrong, and you just want to see, what did I report for this student? And that would be on your report. So the AEI is listed on the Pell Grant POP report, column B, and the multiple reporting record, it's in position 449, and the Pell Grant reconciliation report. So if you're not in a problem status with your POPs, so you're not getting the POP report on a student because it's not a problem, then you're probably not going to get the MRR report either. You can get a Pell Grant reconciliation report for any situation. So go ahead and you can request that, and we'll send it to you, and it's going to be in position 97. And so you can do a data dump to your system. You can figure out where you have discrepancies, all sorts of things. And the Pell Grant year-to-date record as well. You can request that, and the AEI is there in position 251. So again, technical reference, volume 6, section 8, if you need to review any of these reports, how they're laid out, and how you can best use your data to compare with what you have in your system. Okay. Since POP is the #1 issue that we've been having lately with year-round Pell, I'm going to go through a POP example. We want to more clearly illustrate this most common year-round Pell issue. The data used for the schools that are presented here on this slide. Keep in mind that School A has set the eligibility indicator to true and is processing the Pell off of a different CPS transaction ID, and the EFC is different than the one that School B is processing off of, and that can happen. They came to your school fall term, you processed off of one, the second school did a professional judgment or whatever, the kid got chosen for verification late after they ceased to be enrolled at your institution. There's all sorts of reasons why you would have paid on one EFC on one transaction and another school would have paid on another transaction with a different EFC, which is why we always calculate via remaining eligibility percentage and not by dollars, because that's how you get POPs, is you calculate it in dollars possibly. So that's the information for these two schools. And we'll go on to the example. So I tried to lay this out in a way that seemed useful and illustrative. So the student attends summer and fall and then withdraws from School A in January, early January. And after School A discovers that the student has withdrawn and does the R2T4 calculation, they not only reduce the award and disbursement amounts for that student, but they change the AEI flag at their institution from true to false because they can no longer verify that the student's eligibility, that they're eligible for year-round Pell, because they know at their school, they're not just, after the R2T4 calculation, they're no longer dispersing more than 100% at their school. So they change their AEI appropriately from true to false, okay? Then the student, and there's an error on this slide, so I will apologize. The student's now at 108.333%, which is correct, but the EU that I calculated is incorrect. It should be 83.3283, and I will get that corrected before the time we do this session again. It is 83.3283 for the EU on this slide. It should be corrected. So first school did everything right. They did their recalculation. And the other thing I wanted to point out, because some people have brought this to my attention, there is no concurrent enrollment in this example. The student dropped out on the 6th of January and entered and began attendance on January 9th at the other school. Everything's fine. There is no concurrent enrollment in this case. So School B, when they paid this student, they did not know about the R2T4 calculation. They went ahead and they calculated the remaining need at 24.995%, and that was correct at the time. They did not send the AEI flag at this. They figured, well, the first school already set it. Why should I set it? So they didn't set it. But now when the first school, School A, went ahead and did their recalculation, and they appropriately took the AEI from true to false, now we're in a situation where that student's total eligibility used is at 108%, and we've got a POP situation. So the consequences of this example. So, because the student's total eligibility used is greater than 100% and the AEI is false, there is no AEI of true in this, for this student. The student is now in POP, and a Pell multiple reporting record was sent to both schools, and a Pell POP report was sent to both schools. However, School B did not really respond to that. So within the 30 days that schools have to effectively change all that and correct their records, nothing was happened. So in the middle of February, the department took back all the money for the student for both schools, because that's what happens in a POP. So, you know, this is the hard truth about how POP works. You have 30 days to correct the record and figure out if you're the one that caused the problem. We have a lot of schools that are like, I know I dispersed correctly, it's the other school. That is the #1 thing I hear on POP escalations, and they do come to real people. You can call the COD School Relations Center, and they will help you through to see what went wrong in the record. And if they can't help you rectify it, they will kick it up and escalate it to the department. I'm one of those people that will look at this, and then we have to call people. And usually you guys don't like calls from the Department of Ed, because I know this, because when I call the regular number and I ask for whoever we have on record to be the person to contact for Pell issues, they say that you're not available, and they say, can I take a message? And I said, yes, I'm Marie Fitzpatrick. I'm calling from the U.S. Department of Education and Federal Student Aid Grants Division, and I need to speak with this person about a Pell issue. And they're like, hold on, they're available. So I know that you guys don't like to get calls from us, and honestly, we have plenty of things to do. You know, we're happy to talk to you, but we really know that we only call you when there's something wrong. And I know that that's kind of scary. I worked at a school for 13 years, so I know, don't like calls from the department, so I try to keep those to a minimum. So please, if you could look at your POP reports and your MRR reports and really work those. See if the AEI are set appropriately. If the student is eligible, we want them to get that money, and we know it's easier for you guys to work a POP report than it is to redisperse all this money again at both schools, okay? So that's enough said about that issue. I'm gonna go ahead and talk about setting the AEI correctly. How do we avoid these situations? I can't stress to you enough, I know the last thing you all want to do is update your policy and procedures manual, but please, if you don't have anything written in there about the AEI flag, please put it in there. So update your R2T4 calculation procedures. When the AEI is changed from true to false, always, always, always recalculate and submit award and disbursement changes if necessary. Do not just send us the change in the additional eligibility. You will get an edit, okay? Send us all 3 at the same time. Put that in your procedures. Whenever I change an AEI from true to false, put in the procedures that you need to recalculate the award and disbursement and send those into COD as well. If you know that you have a transfer student and you are the 2nd school dispersing, or the 3rd school, or the 4th school, it's happened, dispersing to a student in one award year, please make sure, if you're reliant on any part of the eligibility from 100 to 150%, set your AEI flag to true. Don't rely on that the 1st school or the previous school set it on your behalf. Make sure that you're taking responsibility for your own cut of the eligibility, and if any part of that falls within that 100 to 150 mark, set the AEI flag to true. When you reduce, and I can't stress this enough, when you reduce the student's award and disbursements to 0, you've figured out that they're not coming to your institution, the previous certification of the student's eligibility for year-round Pell is no longer valid. So change your AEI from true to false. If your disbursements are 0, that student is obviously not eligible for year-round Pell at your institution, right? And you are certifying that they are. So something's wrong with that picture. And I can't promise you that one of our auditors would not see that as a problem. And you don't. I mean, this is an easy fix, people. If everything's 0, the AEI should always be no. It's just clean accounting streams. And so I just can't stress that enough. If the disbursements at your school represents any part of the student eligibility, in that award year, again, between 100 and 150%, please submit it as true. It's really important. And the last thing, do not wait until the last week in September to find and correct all your year-round Pell issues. We were slammed this year trying to help people, and we're all for helping people. I want to help people. But the last week in September was really rough for year-round Pell, and getting these changes made and fixing all the pop problems that we couldn't get all of the disbursements submitted in the amount of time. And people came to me, I have 20 pop issues and I can't resolve them. I said, no, it's the last day you can submit disbursement. You're not going to get them all resolved today. So please just leave yourself a little bit of time. Put that in your monthly procedures to look over your pop and resolve them as they come up, and not just in the last week of September. Some operational reminders, not like this whole part of my presentation hasn't been one big operational reminder. These things might help that we've learned when calling into the call center and people contacting us. In our world, there's no first Pell and a second Pell. There's just one Pell to the COD system. When you're sending us a Pell record, you're sending us one Pell record for one award year. So there's only one Pell Grant per student, per school, per award year. And you just make that larger or smaller, depending on what's happening with that student. So there's not one and a second one. And we know what you're saying when you say additional Pell, and even Aaron used the phrase when he was going through his part. So we know what you're talking about when you say additional Pell, but when you get to like, I processed the first Pell, but now I'm trying to process the second Pell, we start to lose, it's all in the semantics when you call the COD center or whether you call one of us, and it's just one of those things where we don't really have a second Pell. So even no matter how your system processes it, and I've found out that some software vendors actually sent this up as a first Pell and a second Pell in the award year. So regardless of how it's set up there, in COD we only have still one Pell, okay? Let's talk about the second bullet, because this is possibly the #1 question we got. If your software product, your university, your bursar system, whoever you want to talk about, does not process in cents, the 1819 maximum at 150% of the maximum Pell is $9,142 even if you don't process the cents. It is not 9143. It is, you must round down. If you process in cents, the student can get the extra 50 cents. It can be $9,142.50 if you process the cents. If you don't get to bump up every one of your Pell Grants by 50 cents. That's not how it works. And I've gotten a lot of calls saying that's not fair to my students, they're missing out on 50 cents. And I said, well, is it fair to every other institution that processes in cents that they're not getting the extra 50-cent bump that you'd like at your institution because you've chosen not to process in cents? So it's kind of like these very futile conversations we have going around. We're going to run into this problem again in 1920 because we already know what the amount's going to be, even though we don't have the Pell schedules. We've already been told that it's going to be increased by $100. So we're still going to end, the maximum Pell is going to be $6,195. So we're still ending in that odd number. So when we multiply it by 1.5, we're still going to have 50 cents. So we're going to always run into this discussion. So I'll just put that out there. And the third thing, always calculate your remaining eligibility used in percentages, not in dollars. Final one, I'm going to leave you with these thoughts. Setting the additional eligibility to true for a student can increase the student's Pell Grant eligibility across all schools for that award year, not just at your school. You are affecting other schools. Schools may not know that their CUD submissions are being edited at the higher limit if another school sets the AEI to true. If you don't know what the previous school set, you don't know that COD is editing against the 150 limit. You may think that you are being edited against the 100 limit. So just keep an eye when you're dealing with transfer students, especially as to what their setup was and what the school did for them at the previous one. And now it's my pleasure to turn this all over to Daniel. And there you go.
Thank you so much. So I want to start by saying, again, thank you for the welcome and the opportunity to speak. I also want to be clear that I'm sharing with you today the perspective from my institution. I'm not speaking on behalf of the department, I'm speaking with the department as a partner.
Well,
so whatever I say, blame me, don't blame them, I guess is the final outcome there.
Oh,
so
we're used to it, we're fine.
Yeah, good, thank you.
I think we can handle it.
So let me tell you a little bit about Valencia. We are located in Orlando, Florida, where it's 30 degrees warmer than Atlanta right now. And so yes, it was a rude shock coming off the plane last night. But we are the state college for both Orange and Osceola County. It's the metropolitan Orlando area. And when I say state college, what I mean is we have primarily two-year programs, but in addition we have +2 programs that lead to the bachelor's degree. We also offer a host of technical certificates and post-secondary AV programs as well. So we have a number of programs that we offer through our campuses. We have 8 campuses, soon to be 9. We're opening up a 9th campus this coming fall, and we're a fairly large institution. So in 2017-18, our head count was over 61,000 students. FTE was about 31,000 full-time equivalency. And you can see that we're primarily a part-time institution. So about a third of our students attend on a part-time basis. And again, for context, we receive about 72,000 FAFSAs a year into our system. We had a total of 21,000, close to 22,000 Pell Grant recipients in 17-18, and our total Pell dollars dispersed was close to $77 million received by students in 2017-18. About 62% of our Pell Grant recipients are full Pell Grant recipients with a 0 EFC, which actually trends about, I don't know what the official number is, but that's fairly representative with what I know about the population in general. So when we found out about year-round Pell and when the announcement was made, we made some internal decisions around communication. And the first thing I wanted to share with you today is a little bit of the communication strategy that we adopted last year to really get the word out to students about year-round Pell. And it started in the fall. Now, again, we'll talk a little bit about our calendar later. We're a fairly traditional fall, spring, summer calendar. Summer is a trailer for us, and I'll discuss in a minute the decisions we made around that. But in the fall, we sent a letter to every student who was enrolled and had a Pell disbursement. This was toward the end of fall, as spring disbursement was beginning, because we wanted to let students know as early as possible about the possibility of year-round Pell for them and the potential increased Pell that they would see in their summer enrollment. And we wanted to give them a heads up about that so that they can make the appropriate enrollment decisions, not just in summer, but in spring as well. Some students have a habit of saving Pell, or had a habit of saving Pell for summer. So we wanted to let them know up front as spring registration was beginning about the possibilities. And that was a single email that went to every Pell Grant dispersed student. In the spring, we then constructed targeted communications that were delivered based on where the student was in their cycle. So if they were enrolled full-time for fall and spring, we sent them a letter in late spring, encouraging them to think about full-time enrollment for summer and detailing for them the limitations around less than half-time enrollment and why that might not be a good idea for this particular summer, encouraging them to think about really making academic progress toward the completion of their degree. If students were enrolled less than full-time for fall and spring, but they were at the level that they might have a benefit from more Pell in the summer, in other words, it was conceivable they could go over the 100% and touch into the 150 range, we encouraged greater summer enrollment for them. It was, again, a targeted email that said, we know you haven't used your full Pell, but there's a possibility you can get more Pell this summer, here's how. And for those students who were enrolled for fall and spring but hadn't reached, if you will, the 50% point already, we talked to them, again, a targeted letter, about how there was still summer Pell available for them as part of the base 100%. We didn't want that to be lost in the conversation about the 150%. So it was really targeted communication. As well, we partnered with our advisors, our academic advisors, our counselors. We had presentations to faculty. We worked with all the financial aid staff and leadership of the college, and we conducted a public outreach campaign, including on our social media channels, to make sure that students knew about the introduction of year-round Pell and what was going to be available to them. And again, I have copies of all of that at some point if you want to take a look at that. But we had some really great partnership with all the individual component pieces of the institution. So to give you a little bit of history, here is, and I apologize if this is tough to see, but here's the financial aid history at Valencia. And again, I want to be very, very clear, this is our financial aid history over the last 7 years. You can see by year the number of FAFSAs we've had, our unduplicated aid recipient count, our total head count, percent on aid, how many Pell Grant recipients we had, and the Pell Grant number. You can also see, really specifically here, the increase from 16-17 to 17-18. We showed an increase of 1,000 Pell Grant recipients and basically a $9 million increase in Pell from the one year to the next. And I'll talk a little more about how that was made up. A side note, and again, I'm happy to talk about this at a later point with anyone who's interested, is we've actually also in those same 7 years experienced a huge reduction in the number of students borrowing direct loans. And so you can see that on our slide as well, not the topic for today, but if you have interest, I'll talk to you later about how and why. So I wanted to share a little bit of some charts to sort of show you the Pell Grant impact for us. So what you're seeing here is really two different figures. The blue number shows you the number of Pell dispersed students by semester for the last 3 years. So fall, spring, into summer. The bottom line, the red line, which is measured on the right side of the chart, shows you the number of credit hours that those students actually took in each of those semesters. And what I want to draw your attention to on this slide is the impact for summer of 2018. In summer of 2018, we had over 9,000 students who were enrolled receiving Pell Grants, and they were enrolled for nearly 67,000 credit hours. This was an increase of almost 42% over the number of Pell Grant recipients from the last 2 summers, and an increase in more than 50% in the number of credit hours enrolled for those same recipients. You can see really how dramatic this change was for us. And in fact, if it's not on this chart, but if I were to show you the total number of credit hours that students took at Valencia, about 39 to 43% of those credit hours were covered by Pell in fall and spring. In the summer, that changed up to 36%. So it basically equated with our fall and spring numbers. We saw dramatic Pell Grant growth in the summer. This next slide shows you the number of full-time students. So, we know that one stated goal for the federal government and for Congress in putting year-round Pell together was to provide incentive for students to continue their full-time enrollment into the summer as well. And we experienced at Valencia an increase of about 60% in terms of full-time Pell enrolled students from summers 16 and 17 to summer 18. This chart also shows you, though, that there's a lot of growth potential, right? So if you look at fall and spring, we have over 7,000 students in fall, over 6,000 students in the spring, and we're still only at about 1,000 full-time students in the summer. So we continue to encourage students to explore the possibility of growing their enrollment for full-time for the summer as well. Yep.
There you go.
So some system considerations that I wanted to let you know about. So we had some challenges in terms of implementing year-round Pell with our vendor partner, our financial aid management system partner. The partner that we used was delayed in getting Pell ready for 150% awarding. So because we're a fall, spring, summer calendar, we were able to defer until summer, but we did experience some delays, and we had multiple patches and releases to address errors in the software. For example, there was an issue with LEUs that were between 500 and 600% not calculating correctly. So we had rounding problems that were part of the software as well. So the good news is the vendor was responsive, but it did take them some time to make corrections. We at Valencia have a very robust testing process. When we bring a new software release in, it goes through robust testing. And as we discovered these issues, we held off for about 4 months in terms of installing additional software releases until the issues were resolved. We did have a thorough conversation because summer is a trailer. We had a thorough conversation about what would we do for students where that wasn't good for them. Did we want to offer individual options based on their enrollment history, or did we want to stick with a uniform decision? In Florida, many of our peer institutions, both the universities and the state colleges, operate with summer as a trailer. So we did make the decision to keep summer as a trailer as our standard course of action. But we knew there'd still be some students who might be impacted. So we did make a plan for other resources like additional institutional funding to help those students who might be negatively impacted by our decision. Or we worked with students who were coming in that preceding summer to talk about financial aid from the previous year. So if there wasn't enrollment for that previous year, how could we encourage them to do a previous FAFSA to take advantage of those dollars that might be left on the table. So again, the impact was small for students who were impacted by our decision to use summer pretty exclusively as a trailer. Wanted to talk a little bit, as Marie mentioned, about the AEI indicator and how important that is, and we face this issue at Valencia as well. So wanted to talk a little bit with you about our awarding process and what we saw and how we corrected AEIs. So given the overwhelming part-time nature of our students, and the fact that students might enroll for one semester and not the next semester, when we set up awarding, we default to award full-time for fall and spring. After that is done and we measure where students are, obviously we don't originate at that level. We wait to originate and disperse until we see what they're actually enrolled in. But at some point in the spring term, we pull the plug, if you will, on rolling forward awards to the summer. And at that point, we again rolled forward full-time awards into summer, which had the impact of setting the AEI indicator to true for many students because we assumed they would be coming full-time in summer. The reason we did that is we wanted to make sure that their accounts would be sheltered based on whatever kind of Pell Grant they might receive, so that they in fact could make decisions about enrollment based on what was best for them. That meant we had a lot of students who had awards for Pell in summer, many of whom then never enrolled in summer. So we knew that was going to be a problem and that they could possibly have an AEI indicator of yes and a TEU of greater than 100%. And then we knew we needed to do some cleanup. One of the challenges we faced is summer is a modular, well actually all of our terms, we operate modules. We have 7 or 8 parts of term depending upon each semester. So as part of that, we knew that we'd have to defer final cleanup for summer until after that final module started. We started the cleanup as soon as we could, which was our summer term begins in May. So we started doing cleanup as we could if we saw students had no enrollment and no plans to enroll. But as Marie said, we tried to clean up and finish our cleanup by late August. Some trailed into early September so that we didn't face the issue of the end of the cycle and running into this POP problem. You'll see as a result, by the way, of our population, about 3,000 students had Pell AEIs of yes, and TEUs greater than 100. That was 13% of our Pell population, almost 14%. The average TEUs for these students was 126%, and the average increased Pell Grant was $1,800. So basically our total increase attributable to year-round Pell was $5.5 million. As I said to you before, we increased over $9 million between the 2 years. So in part, the fact that we did more communication about Pell meant the students who didn't even know they could roll Pell into summer if they didn't use their full 100% also then took advantage of that. And we were successful in getting more students interested and involved and benefiting from Pell Grant. So that's my presentation.
So we
Turn
do.
this back over to you.
Yeah, sure. We have some resources available that you can look at, and I think they might be hyperlinks. Are they hyperlinks? Or are they?
No, we weren't able to do that.
Okay.
They told us we couldn't.
Oh, okay. Well, see, this is the resource page, so you can consult that for more information. We also have our contact information available, so email us your questions, or you can ask them here today. So we're going to start the Q&A portion of the the Q&A section. This is being recorded, so we can post it online at a later date so people can hear what took place at the Federal Student Aid Conference that weren't able to attend. So there are 3 mic stands, 1, 2, and 3. And if you have a question, please speak directly into the mic, and I will call. I see we already have one person, so I think we're going to start with mic number 2.
It's me? Hi.
Yes.
One of your slides, you had, I don't know which one it was, what the number of the slide is, but you were showing the AEI with the year-round Pell, and it was 125% in the fall and the spring at one school, and then they withdrew.
Yeah, my example. Sure, I'll get back.
The summer was a header, was it? Was it yours? It was your thing.
Okay.
The first
It was my slide?
Yeah,
Okay.
it was your slide.
I'll get back.
Your slides.
And it was the header, you said?
The one with the header and the trailer?
Okay.
I think so, yeah.
Oh, wait.
There we
Got
go.
it?
Go one forward. Yeah.
That one?
Okay.
Yeah, I think this was the one. Well, this is one of them that I had a question about. In this one, where you have the summer semester, that's not involved, I want to know if that summer 18 is now, since you're using summer 19 for the year-round Pell, is that summer 18 then a trailer for 17, 18?
Okay, so we know that, let me just back up. We know that the initial award is summer 18 and fall 18, right? So the additional Pell is, you said you don't want me to use the word additional Pell?
No, it's okay.
Okay,
You can go ahead.
the additional Pell is going to actually take place in the, let's see, 87. So there's gonna be a little bit of additional Pell in the spring 2019 because the student has used about, 62% of their eligibility for summer and fall, right? And so it looks like, about 40% for the spring.
Is the question, can you have both a header and a trailer?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Is that the question?
No, that isn't really the question.
Okay.
I want to make sure on this one, I think you can if it's within the 150%,
Yes,
right?
you can have both
but
a header
it
and a
wouldn't
trailer.
I guess it's confusing that you made the spring 2019 show 50%, and it's really
It is 50%.
not, well, if it's 50-50 and then the 25, it's not really the 50 because it's partly taken up by the summer 18, right?
He's just talking about the eligibility used in that term. It's not adding it to anything
so
else.
that's
So
what I'm
it's
a little
just
confused.
how much eligibility did that student use in that term with that disbursement. So it is 50%.
Okay, so then there was another one that was yours, I believe,
Okay,
also about this.
okay.
Where they took back money,
Yeah.
they changed the AEI to false, right? Wait, let me see. what it is.
Yes, hold on, we'll
Hold
get
on.
there. That one?
This one, right. This
Right.
one I'm not getting, because
Okay.
over there, School A shows 125% used, so that should have been changed.
Well, so the top part was before the withdrawal. So
So it
it's
was-
just showing
oh, that was-
what it was before. And the bottom part shows that it was 108% after the recalculation was done.
All right, so the last question I have is packaging that's with ED Express.
Okay.
Also does not accommodate cents. So what it usually does is it divides it, the total is always the correct amount, but let's say it's 2,500 in the first semester, 2,501 for the second. So the rounded dollar comes out in the second semester, that's okay?
And exactly, the ED Express just issued something recently that talks about that, and I thought I had somebody in the audience. Yes, we just issued something recently for ED Express talking about the rounding and how you could set it up in the systems so to accommodate some of the problems that were being had
So as long
because
as
of
the
that.
total isn't over what the person's supposed to be getting, like the example you showed, they rounded up. The total is the correct amount, then it doesn't matter if it's
Right.
not accommodating.
And we don't care if you want to do the round up on the first and round down.
Right.
You're allowed to do that.
Okay,
You're just not allowed to go over the limit.
Right.
And
Okay.
that's the only thing we are trying to stress here.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Microphone 1.
Hello, my name's Rosanna. I'm from a software vendor. And I just had a question about this slide also.
Okay.
For setting the AEI indicator here, you say to set it to false for school A, but it's still over 100% after the R2T4 is performed.
Not at their school.
Not at school A?
No, not at school A. The 108% after the R2T4 calculations were at both schools, and 24.9995% was at school 2. So their percentage was 83.8295.
Got
So they were not then dispersing any portion over 100%. That is
Okay.
why.
Okay, great. So the 108 is for both schools. So then if they had performed R2T4 at school A and it was over 100%, they would leave the indicator as true.
They would leave
Okay.
yeah, because if they changed it to false, they would have a problem at their school as well. They'd get a slew of edits saying, because COD would then edit them at 100%.
And we did have some cases of this as well, where we had to, again, tell the system it was true, because we were the last one to disperse, even though, again, it wasn't over 100% at our institution.
Right.
But we were the one who caused it to be over 100%.
Right.
in
You
total.
might have only dispersed 25%, but you have to be the one to set the AEI flag if that represents between 100 and 150%
Yeah.
for that student for that award year.
That makes sense. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Number 2, please.
The screen that you had previously that showed the remaining trailer, 25%,
Yeah, this one from Aaron.
you had a
Okay.
trailers.
Okay, I'm getting it back. Go ahead.
That's it. Is it possible, and I don't think it is, but can a term, I'm going to use the word term here, be a trailer and at the same time a header for the coming year? Meaning, can in that same period the student get the remaining 18-19 award because she is eligible, but at the same time getting the 19-20?
So you have to decide which year, if it's a crossover payment, you have to
Okay, so
decide.
you have to decide at that moment, it's either 18-19
Yeah.
as a trailer or a header. It
A header
cannot-
for
you can't wear
19-20.
two hats.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. The payment period has to come out of the same award year.
Okay, just wanted to
You
make
just
sure.
have to decide which one it is.
Yeah, I figured they could get money for both. Thank you.
Thank you. Number 1, please.
Oh, yeah, that's me, sorry. Just in follow-up to that question, so on slide 41, mentioning that Valencia is summer is a trailer.
41.
And so if a student had a lower EFC in the subsequent age years FAFSA, was that a challenge for you when some had the better EFC for the prior year and some had the better EFC? How did you handle that?
It's a great question. So again, we did, as part of this conversation, we did set aside institutional resources to address some of these issues. So if a student came to us with a concern around that, we did address that on a case-by-case basis. So yeah, it's a great point. Again, we knew making this decision there would be some institutional cost, but we measured the cost-benefit of trying to be flexible for everyone or standard. And we decided standard was how we wanted to implement. It's not the only way, but that's how we made our decision. Thanks for the question.
Thank you.
Hi. I actually want to give voice to some non-term degree modular programs. And I remember doing the crossover Pell, the year-round Pell. And it seemed like y'all took the easier option of just focusing on semester schools or semester programs. I need some help with the modular programs that are doing payment periods concerning all of that. I don't know if you can kind of take, you know, some of the examples and use that as a, because it seems like to me with this, the examples that you're showing, the non-term degree programs would probably not really fall into that, whereas before, we really were able to use that year-round Pell, and a lot of students got 3, even like 4 disbursements of the Pell.
And you're talking about when we did 2 Pels in an award year?
Yeah.
Okay, and yeah, and the difference now.
Yeah.
So it's a recommendation. It's a recommendation in future presentations to include
The non-term
non-term.
degree,
Yeah,
the ones
as
that
an
are not-
example.
Yeah, like, because what it is that we use payment periods. So what I'm trying to figure out is, with my students, based on your examples, they may not be taking advantage of the year-round Pell unless I go and do their entire individual plan to see, hey, what's going to happen. Because it sounds like to me I have to map out their Pell for their entire program, not just one award year, to see where we're going to fall in and where we're going to need to put an AEI in. You understand what I'm saying? Or you don't do non-term degree?
We're going to have to talk to our individual.
Yeah, we can talk individually. I mean, you calculate Pell for the payment period, and then you establish the amount of eligibility the student used for that period. And if that doesn't add up to 150 or it adds up to the 150 limit, you can disperse Pell. But what I can do is take your advice about adding more information about non-term programs if we do the presentation for next year. Of course,
Okay.
it's done for this year.
And you know, we're always stressing, you know, in the FSA handbook as well, you know, including more examples for non-traditional based
Yeah,
programs.
but it sounds like I will have to kind of map this out for the student to see where if they would fall into that situation. Like most of the time, if a student doesn't start traditionally, that's when they'll fall into those situations where everything's kind of overlapping in the upcoming years.
Right.
So,
Yeah, and I don't know that it's that different for, you know, your traditional based term programs. I mean, they don't know all the time whether the student's going to be eligible for year-round Pell when they
Gotcha.
start. They only know maybe sometimes when they enroll for summer
Gotcha.
or whatever. I mean, the determination for year-round Pell is rarely at the beginning of the payment year. You know, it's sometimes only after a while has gone by and you've paid out 100% possibly, and then they're going to keep coming. Okay. You know,
Okay.
Daniel was very proactive at his institution.
I was about to say he was.
I am sure that's probably not happening everywhere. So, you know, talk to your colleagues at association meetings, things like that, but I'm sure not everyone is. We hold Daniel's school as an example of how you could be really proactive about this.
And I would say if we were a different kind of institution, I mean, the fact that we have huge enrollment for summer meant that we had to make certain decisions. So, you know, to the extent that you've asked, does the structure of your program mean that you have certain enrollment patterns in mind? Absolutely, right? You may have clock hour programs that are over, you know, a full, whatever your period, your total academic year is. In that situation, you're going to hit the 150%. So part of that is how do you communicate with students around it. But as you heard Marie say, we didn't go in at the start of the year thinking anyone was going to be 150% because we didn't know. So that is part of the process.
Nor did you have a system that could accept that.
That's right. That's
Yeah,
also
that's
true.
true.
Yep.
Okay, thanks a lot. And also I wanted to let you know it is hyperlinked at the end. Those
It is
great- those
hyperlinked. Great.
resources, yes.
All right.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you. Mic stand number 2 again.
Hello. I had a question about your example with the total eligibility used
Okay.
indicator where it had school 1, school 2.
Okay.
Student attended the first school and then within like 3 days was attending the next school.
Yeah.
My question with that is a hypothetical. If the student received 100% Pell at the first school and so did not have the additional eligibility indicator set and then came to my school and we awarded them the additional 50% and we set the indicator, that student then has an R2T4 at their prior school and let's say that drops them back to 75%, I'm not going to get anything to let me know that that student may be eligible then for a next semester with us for 25%. right?
You are not.
Because my additional eligibility indicator would still need to be in place for the one semester of Pell that we awarded them, but we could potentially award 2, but how are we going to catch that?
And part of this is when you dispersed and how well you analyzed what came back in the common record response that you get from COD, because every time we're going to send you the total eligibility used. Every time you disperse or you send us something in that, we will reiterate at this current date, this is what, when we process this, this is what the new total eligibility used calculation is. So we're sending this back to you every time you send us something.
So it should come back saying,
So,
now,
and-
125, you could do a potentially additional 25 for the
It's just
next.
going to tell you the TEU. How you interpret it at your school is up to you.
Okay.
But we will tell you, like if when you disperse the first time to that student and it was at 150%, and now you've sent in an additional information to us, and in that response, we sent to you, now it's 75%, I don't know that there's anything in your system that you would be like, whoa, that's a big change. What happened at the prior school? It's really how you monitor your transfer students. And because it's not going to happen to your continuing students that you're the only one that was dispersing to that student. It's only going to happen to your people that had been dispersed somewhere else. So if you have a system in place and how to monitor that, so you would know we are sending that back to you in the common record response.
And I would say in response to that, so in this scenario, for example, we wouldn't be dispersing aid probably for the period of 30 days anyway, just in terms of timeframes. And looking at when the withdrawal took place and the requirements of R2T4 and turnaround, there is a period at which we might not know.
Right.
But it's probably unlikely if the other school is on the ball and is doing the withdrawal within the required time frame, we probably would have that as part of that response. So yeah, but it's an interesting point.
Okay, and then like if the original school had done 125 and we'd done the additional 25, they had the indicator set, we had the indicator set. Oh, never mind, I just answered my own question.
There you go. You both had it set, you're good to go.
Yeah.
We have more?
So we do have 3 minutes left. If anybody else has a question, they can come to the mic. Number 3, please.
Hello. I have a question for you, Daniel, just out of curiosity.
Oh, good.
In your summer term, you have modules. Do you have a Pell recalculation date for each module, or do you have one?
It's a great question. We've changed that policy as part of our living experience. So currently, our Pell recalculation date, well, I would say in 16, 17, we had different Pell recalculation dates by module. And we are in the process of moving that to a single recalculation date. But in the current year, or the year we're talking about, 17, 18, we were still in individual Pell recalculation dates by module, which meant that we had potential for a lot of changes coming through.
Okay, so that you're changing it as a result of the
So
Pell
we
grant
use,
increase.
we use, actually, think about, we use the last module that they're enrolled in, the add drop date of that module as their Pell recalculation date. And if they don't have enrollment for the later term, at the time we calculate it, they're out of luck. So, right, so if you enroll module 1 but don't enroll module 2 at that point,
Right.
it's as of the add date of module 1. If you have module 1 and module 2 enrollment, it's as of the add date of module 2.
Good deal. Thank you.
Yeah. Happy to take that. That's a quick answer to a long question, so we can talk later too.
We have about 1 minute and 40 seconds left. If anybody wants to approach the mic and ask a question. I think that we can't entertain questions with people approaching the podium at the end because they have to have time to turn the room over for the open forum. So if you do have any additional questions, we can likely meet you out in the hall for a moment.
You'll have to follow us out to the hall.
Yeah.
If you're one of those people that don't want to talk on the mic and still have a question, because we often get a rush to the podium, but we've been told that we have a very finite amount of time in this room. So we will still be available to you, but it would have to be out in the hall. Okay?
Thank you.
Well, thank you all for coming.